first one is actually also pointing to what you should do at the start of your research project, which of course precedes publishing of your results, and that's reading the literature. So you might want to refuse to read the literature in your field, but you should of course realize that it's very important that if your research wants to have some value, it should of course be based on what is already known, what is already available, and your publication should actually add knowledge to the field. And this is something that should also hold for review paper. So a review paper is not valuable if it just repeats items or knowledge that you can find already in other papers. You really have to add something to the knowledge, or new insights that were, for example, based on reviewing the literature. Repetition of earlier work is something that you should never do. It's a waste of your time, but it's also a waste of time of the editors and the reviewers that will potentially start reading your article. And although you might think that it's certainly impossible to read all the papers and publications that have already been published and are continuously being published by the people in your field, well, papers of course have titles and they have abstracts, and these are actually meant to help you discriminate on what you will read in detail and what you will actually not read in detail. And of course you might want to narrow your literature study down very much to the actual field of your study. So this is an example of an article that I co-authored some time ago with two colleagues, and the name of the journal already indicates the type of articles, of course, that you can expect in it. And then you read the title, you might want to have a look at the short abstract, and if the abstract is written in a good way, then it gives you a good indication of what you can find in the article, and then you might decide whether you want to actually read this or not. Right, let's move on to the second tip, and this is a very important one. So this is also the one that I will spend most time on now by addressing it. And that's actually, okay, suppose that you do the literature review and you print these papers and you read them and you actually like some of them, or maybe you like some sections in these papers and some of the figures, maybe even the results. You might want to decide to copy that, to put it in your paper and to put your name on top of it. And this is of course what is called plagiarism, and certainly nowadays with more and more publications being added on the internet continuously, you can rest assured that sooner or later plagiarism will be detected, and this is something that I think you should always have in mind, and you cannot be careful enough. So there are many academic publishers that actually have digital procedures to very efficiently detect plagiarism, such as, for example, the cross-ref similarity check. And I will show you now just an example of a paper that I handled, I think 2 weeks ago for Building an Environment. And of course, the name of the author and authors and of the institution have been blanked out. But this is actually what you see as an editor if you check a paper for plagiarism. So this is the cross-ref tool that shows at the top right side the percentage of overlap with other existing sources. And you see 18%, that it might seem as a lot, but of course there are some sentences that are difficult to write in other ways. So this does not necessarily indicate that this is a case of plagiarism. However, then you need to look further in this article. And at some places you might indeed find that a lot of sentences, or at least large parts of sentences, are really taken from one particular other publication, which was in this case written by another author. So this is quite problematic, and if you continue reading or checking, you might also find other sentences or parts of sections just actually taken from another publication. So although this is not the most severe case of plagiarism that one can imagine, because you see here and there some words are changed, this of course was enough to reject this paper. It can get worse, and when things get worse, also the consequences can be worse and should be worse. So I would also like to give you an example now of a case of plagiarism that actually happened to me. So it's somebody that plagiarized one of my articles, and then the actions actually that were taken by Elsevier after a quite elaborate procedure to actually go against this action by these authors. You might find that the example I will be giving you and the actions that have been taken, that these are quite harsh, but you also should remember that plagiarism is actually theft of ideas or words or results, and that's a crime. So I think there's no better statement than to indicate this here in red letters. So this is an example. This is an article that I wrote with 3 very good colleagues. It was published in 2011. It was a review article, so quite lengthy, and we studied more than 350 other articles and books because of it. And then actually in February, I think, of 2016, I regularly check actually for plagiarism, and then I actually found a case. And how can you check for plagiarism? Well, concerning articles published in Elsevier journals, you can very easily use Science Direct. You take as the search term your last name, you search for references, and then you can find articles that are actually citing your work, and then you can immediately see whether they're actually copying part of your work or not. So this was actually a case where not just some words were taken, but large parts of sections were copied word by word, exactly every point and every comma in the same way. So these are some pages of my article that you can see here, and what I highlighted in yellow are actually the parts that were literally just taken over without adding quotes, without adding references, although actually my article did appear in the reference list, but of course that is not enough. So then you report this to the publisher, you report it to the editor, and of course this is a very serious matter, both for the plagiarized authors and the plagiarizing authors. So the publishers take these things very seriously. So after a procedure of about 6 months, with having consulted anonymous experts, also editors of other journals, then a committee reached the decision that indeed this was a very severe case of plagiarism and that it should be retracted. And what then happens actually is that the journal publishes a retraction notice, like the one that you see here on this screen. So again, I of course have blanked out the name of authors and their institution. So that's a notice referring to the title of the paper. And then you see at the bottom, and I'll read it up aloud for you. It says that one of the conditions of submission of a paper for publication is that authors declare explicitly that their work is original and has not appeared in a publication elsewhere. As such, this article represents a severe abuse of the scientific publishing system. The scientific community takes a very strong view on this matter, and apologies are offered to readers of the journal that this was not detected during the submission process. So that's quite a clear message. And that's not all. What is then also done is that the article, the PDF, remains online, but every page is stamped in big red letters retracted. And I think that all of us here will agree that this is something you don't want to happen to your article. So this is actually a bit like the modern fire stake, and although indeed you might think that this is quite harsh as a repercussion, you have to remember plagiarism is a crime. And if you do it, you also have to be willing to suffer the consequences. So that's why also in these 10 tips I wrote that plagiarism, no matter how small and no matter how old the documents are that you are plagiarizing, it's a very effective route if you want to do academic self-destruction.